Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the NRW. I am your host today, Rob Medina, and I thank you very much for joining me here today. And today I'm going to be reviewing the movie A Taste of Blood. And as you can tell right now that I am not on the screen here again because I figured I'm just going to do a quick off-the-cuff review about my thoughts on the film. I just saw this movie, A Taste of Blood, and I was actually really excited for this film. I saw the trailer for this movie, and I was lucky enough to get a screener for this film. And and I'll be honest, I think the movie does have a lot of great elements. It's beautifully shot, very well directed. The overall story in itself, I thought was rather intriguing. Unfortunately for me, the way it was executed in certain respects of the story just did not work for me all that well. There were a lot of elements to the story that I thought worked very well, which I'll be kind of getting into here, but I'm not going to reveal a lot of spoilers in this review because I did discover some things along the way as the film progressed that I thought worked on surface, but the way it was executed didn't work necessarily well for me personally. But as far as the plot synopsis is concerned to this film, essentially this takes place on certain hours after a vampire hunt when it's unclear if the hunter himself has been turned into a creature of the night, and it's indicating here in the plot synopsis that will the family find out in time, or will their sentiment make them easy prey for the novice night stalker? So that right there is the film in the nutshell. Here's what one of the biggest problems that I had with the movie right off the bat is that this movie was shot, I believe, in Argentina. It's the cast is made up of Argentine actors. You can hear them in their accent. But what I found extremely off-putting that I noticed in the trailer right away was that all the actors are speaking Spanish, but a few of the characters were dubbed in English. And then some of the other actors were still speaking in Spanish, and then the characters that were dubbed in English were responding back, of course, in English. That really took me out of the film. It was very hard for me, not very hard to say. It took a little time for me to get used to that. I would say more through the halfway point, maybe a little past that, for me to get accustomed to that jumping back and forth between the dubbing and then the actual language that the actors are speaking here. So I just was confused with that. I didn't understand why all the actors were not dubbed or why all the actors were not speaking in their native language in the original audio here. It was very, very confusing for me, but it didn't necessarily take me out of the film the majority of the time. But it definitely was extremely noticeable. But some of the things that really worked for me in the film were really the visuals. The visuals are quite stunning in this movie. In fact, one of the things about this film that I thought was really, really effective was the setting up the atmosphere for the story, especially when it came to the daylight scenes and then when it came more into the night scenes. I thought they were actually handled rather well, having that isolated feel to the movie that I thought worked very effectively. But as far as the execution of the story, some of it worked here. And I'm not going to get into any spoilers here for this film because I think it's best for you to see the movie for yourself and then judge on your own terms and how you feel about the film. Now, this film is being promoted on a new take on a A.K. Tolstoy's, I believe, a short story from that, if I recall correctly. And that story is called The Family of the Vordalak. And the Vordalak, I believe, is a Russian word for vampires. But essentially with that particular storyline, it deals with a young French diplomat who finds himself in a small suburban village in this house of an old peasant named Gorcha. So apparently the host is absent. Yeah, he left the house 10 days ago with some other men to hunt for a Turk outlaw named Alibek, if I recall correctly, if I read that correctly. And upon leaving, he told his sons to wait for him for exactly 10 days sharp. And if he were to come a minute later, to kill him by driving a stake through his heart, or then he'd be not a man of a Vordalak, which is again a vampire here. So that's kind of more or less the story in the nutshell for that original story here. Whereas the film, it does have a very similar plot to that short story there. But honestly, when I read the synopsis to the original story, I actually liked that one more than what I saw in the film. But here's what I will point out as one of the positives for this movie. I think all the actors in this movie have done a phenomenal job with their performances in this film. There's a lot of strong performances in this movie from everybody here, especially when it dealt with some of the more dramatic beats in the story. As far as the horror is concerned, I wasn't necessarily feeling it all that much. I'm not saying it didn't work. I'm sure it will work for a lot of people. But I think the biggest problem with the movie, at least for me personally, is that when it came to the buildup, kind of felt a little flat for me personally. There were some great shots of the vampires themselves. They look, I wouldn't say unique, but they look pretty cool. They look like they were very well done as far as the makeup is concerned. And they definitely look very menacing. Like they look like a threat, but I didn't necessarily feel them as a threat, if that makes any sense. So, here's what I will point out about this movie that I think did definitely work for me personally, and that's the way that the film is handled when it came to the atmosphere for the horror elements that we get from this movie. I do believe that worked very effectively. And again, even though I'm kind of going all over the place here, but the biggest thing that didn't work for me was just the more or less the pacing of this movie and the way that the film was executed, especially when you get towards the end. Because when the movie starts off, it starts with the characters telling a story about where they started from and how they ended up where they are now. And then when the film ends there, it makes more sense why them telling the story was very important here, at least for this film. And I thought in that respect, it did kind of work. And I actually thought that the build up to that, to a certain degree, did work effectively, especially the way the film ended. I wasn't thrilled with the ending. I didn't hate the ending by any means. I don't think it was a terrible ending by any means. It was actually rather good, but just didn't do much a whole lot for me. So as far as my ratings are concerned for this film, I do believe this movie is worth a watch because there were a lot of strong elements to this movie that I did rather enjoy. And the writer and director of this film, I'd be very curious to see what they're going to work on next if given an opportunity to try something different here. Even if they were to stick with the horror genre, I do like their approach. Just wasn't very happy with the way it was executed for me personally, as I mentioned before. But otherwise, my rating for this film really is going to be just worth a shot. Just so you're aware, this movie will be released on Blu-ray and digital on May 10th this week. So I do recommend you guys check out the film. I think there are some things about this movie that you guys will enjoy. I also know that there may be some people out there who may have a problem with the movie being rather slow because it is a rather slow film. But there still were elements I think that worked rather well. But a lot of it does have to do with that spoiler territory that I didn't want to get into here because I don't want to ruin that experience here for you as you watch the film. And hopefully you guys will come to enjoy it more so than I did here. But is this going to be a film that I would go back and watch again? Honestly, probably. But I would only do it if someone wanted to see the film with me. I would sit down and watch it with them just to see if my initial thought process of the first time watching the film is still going to be consistent upon second viewing here. But I really don't have much of anticipation to want to go back and watch the film, at least right now. But otherwise, I still do recommend you check out the film. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it here. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure you share, like the videos, and hit the notification bell while you're down there. And we'll also follow us on our social media accounts as well. On Instagram, New Release Wednesdays; on Facebook, Nerds Rule the World; and on Twitter at the NRW. And you can also follow me on my social media accounts as well. On Instagram and Twitter, Mr. Rob Medina, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And also, I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and I also have social media for the show as well. On Instagram, it's You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And I want to thank you all very much for checking out this review. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and until next time, stay safe out there, and cheers.